You're pathetic. Sign it when you're done crying.
They buried my wife under gray skies and wet leaves, the kind of Pittsburgh autumn where the air smells like rusted iron and rain-soaked wood. My boots sank an inch into the grass as the casket lowered. 37 years together, and all I could think about was how quiet she was now, like the steel mill after a blackout. The pastor said a few words, people sniffled, a cousin coughed. Then, just as I turned to walk away, she stepped forward, my daughter-in-law. She didn't hug me, didn't offer condolences. She slipped a folded paper into my hand, smiled without her eyes, and whispered, just loud enough for my son to hear, "You're pathetic. Sign it when you're done crying." That was the first moment I felt something crack inside me. Before we continue, if you've ever had someone betray you while you were grieving, subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment. You're not alone. My name's Richard Marino. I'm 68, born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. From my front porch in Braddock, you can still see the U.S. Steel Tower poking out of the smog like a tombstone for a life I used to live. For 42 years, I was a millwright at the Edgar Thomson Works, kept the gears spinning while my knees gave out and the world changed without asking me first. But none of that mattered the day I lost Maria. That night, I couldn't bring myself to open the paper. It sat on my kitchen table under the dim orange glow of a dying ceiling bulb. The room smelled faintly of coffee and cold rain carried in on my coat. Right next to it lay the receipt from the funeral parlor and the unused sympathy cards I never mailed. They looked too cheerful now, pale blues and gold script meant for someone else's grief, not mine. The house felt bigger than it had in years. Every clock tick was a hammer strike. The refrigerator hummed and cut off in odd intervals, the way it used to when Maria would thump it with her hip to keep the motor from whining. I caught myself almost calling out to her, some reflex buried so deep I didn't know it would surface. Eventually, with hands that didn't feel like mine, I unfolded the paper. Loan agreement, $82,000. Already signed by my son, already notarized. All that was missing was my signature to use my house as collateral. They waited until she was dead to do this. For a long while, I just sat there, reading and rereading each line, as if I could blink and have the numbers disappear. The legal language felt like barbed wire, cold, tangled, designed to snag and hold. My thumb left a faint damp spot on the corner where it trembled. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the shadows moving across the floorboards as the streetlight outside flickered in and out like a dying breath. Every sound in the house was suddenly loud, the groan of the water heater, the faint settling of the roof under cold air. Somewhere deep inside me, the part that had been busy, just surviving, working shifts, fixing broken belts, keeping a house together, started to wake up and take notice. In the morning, I tried to be reasonable. I called my son. No answer. Tried again. This line has been disconnected. The robotic voice didn't even sound apologetic. I sat there, staring at the dead line. Coffee went cold in my hand. I thought about the first time I'd taken him to Kennywood when he was 5, how he'd screamed on the Thunderbolt until I laughed so hard my sides hurt. Now the man wouldn't pick up the phone. 3 days later, an email arrived. Not from him, from her. "We're moving into a better school district. Need help with the down payment. You should be honored to contribute. P.S. You still haven't signed." No, dear Dad. No sympathy. Just instructions. She knew exactly what she was doing. The next Sunday, they showed up unannounced. No knock that I heard. Just the sound of a key turning in the lock, like they still owned the place. She walked in first, heels clicking on my wife's polished wood floors, chewing gum like a teenager in court. Her coat was some sleek beige thing, probably expensive. Her hair didn't move when she tossed it back. My son followed behind her, eyes low, hands stuffed in his coat like they didn't belong to him. She sat at my dining room table without asking, pulled out the same loan paper, and placed it gently on top of the obituary I'd left there by mistake. "Just sign it. We have a notary in the car." Her voice was sweet but sharp, the kind of sweet that cuts. I looked at my son. He didn't look back, didn't even shift, just stared at a spot on the floor like it could swallow him. I made coffee. It felt like the only thing I could control. The pot sputtered and hissed. The smell filled the room. I poured myself a cup. The mug was chipped on one side. Maria used to call it my battle mug. She'd tried to throw it out years ago, but I'd kept it. Maybe some part of me knew I'd need it for mornings like this. I sat down across from them. Didn't speak. Just stared at the paper until the silence got thick enough to choke on. "Look," she said finally, her gums snapping between words. "We're not asking for much. You've got no mortgage, no kids at home. Why let the house rot when you can help your family?" She smiled when she said family, but it sounded like an insult in her mouth. My son still said nothing. Not even a glance. They left when I didn't say yes. But they didn't take the paper with them. It stayed there, mocking me, like a loaded gun I wasn't allowed to touch. Later that week, I got a call from my credit union. "Mr. Marino?" the woman said, polite but tense. "We just wanted to confirm that you're co-signing a home equity loan." I asked her what address. She told me mine. I told her I never signed anything. There was a long pause, the kind that carries both shock and quiet pity. "Sir, the paperwork is already in review. You might want to come down." I went. The credit union smelled of printer toner and carpet cleaner. I'd been there 100 times over the years, cashing paychecks, signing for modest car loans. This felt different. Every click of the teller's keyboard sounded louder than usual, and what I saw nearly made me pass out. A new file, fresh signature page, my name, my birth date, my address, forged. Same handwriting as the sticky notes she left on my fridge last Christmas. "Don't forget the ham." Same loop on the R. I held the paper in my hands and felt the edges dig into my fingers. My hands were trembling so badly the page fluttered like a weak bird. I wasn't just being pressured. They had already stolen from me. The woman behind the desk, young, maybe 30, looked at me with quiet alarm but kept her voice professional. "It'll take a few days to investigate, sir. I suggest freezing your credit in the meantime." I nodded, couldn't find words. Walked out into the parking lot and just stood there. The cold November air cut through my coat like I wasn't wearing anything at all. Across the street, a Walmart sign glowed pale against the gray sky. Maria used to love their lemon-scented candles, said they made even a steelworker's house smell alive. I went inside and bought 2. Didn't even smell them, just needed to hold something she'd once loved. Back home, I lit one. The tiny flame trembled like it wasn't sure it belonged there. I set the forged paper beside it and stared at both until my eyes burned. And something inside me, something quiet, something sharp, started to wake up. The next morning I opened Maria's closet, not to grieve. I'd already done enough of that in silence with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the ache in my chest. I opened it because I remembered something, the old lockbox. Bottom left corner, behind a stack of folded quilts Maria refused to give away, even when the closets were overflowing. It was there, right where she left it, still heavy, still cold, still locked. I knelt, the floorboards groaning under my knees. Dust coated the lid like a thin gray skin. My fingers hesitated a second before touching it, the way you pause before opening an old wound. The steel was icy, even in the heated house, a cold that seemed to reach straight into my bones. Inside, I found what I needed, the deed, the power of attorney, our original mortgage release, the one we celebrated paying off with cheap champagne on the back porch, laughing as fireworks cracked over the Monongahela. All in my name. No mention of my son. No joint ownership. No reason for them to feel entitled. Maria and I had been deliberate about this. We'd made it clear. The house would be mine while I lived, and only if they proved worthy, if they showed love, respect, responsibility, would it someday become theirs. Not as a right, as a gift. They knew that. They just didn't care. The next few weeks became a silent war. At first, it was phone calls, polite ones on the surface. Hey, Dad, just checking if you've looked at the paperwork. Hope you're doing okay. We know it's a tough time, but, the bank's waiting. Each time I hung up, the dial tone stayed in my ear like a hiss. Then came the letters. Formal envelopes with stiff, fake-friendly language. We understand this is a difficult period, but we kindly request your cooperation in expediting the process. Then the emails, each one colder than the last. We can't wait forever. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The bank needs your confirmation or we lose the rate. And with each message, the tone shifted. Less patient, more demanding. By the third week, they stopped pretending to be gentle. One email came in with a subject line that just said, in all caps, you owe us. No greeting, no explanation. Just an attachment, a spreadsheet they'd put together, a breakdown of what they claimed I owed them. Gas money from 5 years ago. A used car loan they said I co-signed. I hadn't. Even the cost of a crib they'd bought when their daughter was born. They'd taken every family moment, every favor, every small help, every shared expense, and converted it into a dollar amount. I stared at that list for a long time. My chest went cold, then hot. My ears buzzed. I printed the email, pinned it to the fridge. Every morning I stood in front of it while I drank my coffee, letting the anger steep like dark roast. It became a ritual, like sharpening a blade. Then the house keys went missing. I'd kept a spare set in the drawer beside the fridge for 20 years. Always there, always ready. One day, gone. I tore the drawer apart. Pens, batteries, old screws, faded takeout menus scattered across the counter. But the keys weren't there. 2 days later, I came home from a doctor's appointment and froze in the doorway. The living room was different. Maria's throw blanket was gone from the couch. My recliner, the one she gave me for my 50th birthday, worn perfectly to my back, had vanished. In its place, a cheap flat-pack desk, still half-assembled, the Allen wrench tossed carelessly on top. Under it, a small child's toy. One of those plastic keys that make fake car noises. The air smelled like someone else's perfume. A faint, sugary floral that didn't belong in my house. I felt something deep inside shift, a warning siren going off in my gut. I called my son. This time he answered. You weren't using the space, Dad, he said like it was obvious. It's temporary. We're planning ahead. My voice came out lower, quieter than I expected. You broke into my home. We have a key. You gave it to us. For emergencies. He paused. A silence that stretched too long. This is an emergency. You're not thinking clearly. Click. The call ended. I stood there in the half-changed living room, surrounded by unfamiliar things, and felt the air go thin. That night, I didn't sleep in my bed. Not because I was scared, not yet, but because I needed space to think. I took my old Ford Ranger, parked it in the Walmart lot, and stayed there. The cab smelled like oil and old leather. The dashlight flickered when I turned the key halfway. The heater worked only if you tapped it twice. It became my war room. I stuffed the glove box with paper copies, bank statements, emails, notarized records. I made folders. I labeled them in thick black marker. Lies, forgery, timeline, Maria's notes. Some nights, I'd sit there under the yellow parking lot lights, sorting documents while the radio played scratchy old blues. The engine ticked softly as it cooled in the cold night air. The loneliness didn't feel empty anymore. It felt strategic, like the quiet before a hammer drops. That's when I started to remember things. Little things? Like the Christmas Maria pulled me aside while everyone laughed in the living room and whispered, "I don't trust her with your pills, Rich. Count them yourself." I'd laughed it off then, kissed her cheek, told her she was overthinking. Or the birthday dinner years ago when my daughter-in-law, wineglass in hand, bragged to her friends about fixing old people's finances like spring cleaning. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile. Maria didn't, or the look on Maria's face the day the notary came to visit. That tight, nervous smile she used when she didn't want to upset me but knew something was wrong. She'd known. She'd tried to warn me, and I hadn't listened. One cold afternoon, sorting through the attic, I found a letter. It was buried under old Christmas decorations and a box of Maria's scarves. My fingers brushed the edge of an envelope yellowed from years of dust. Maria's handwriting, addressed to me. I sat down right there on the attic floor and opened it, hands shaking. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop them. They convinced me to sign something, but I wasn't sure what it was. They said it was just for safety, just in case anything happened. It wasn't notarized, it wasn't legal, but it was enough. Enough to confirm what I already suspected. They had started this long before she was gone. They were planting seeds while I was still bringing her soup, helping her to the bathroom, holding her hand through chemo. My throat closed as I read her words over and over. She had tried to protect me, even in her last days. She had felt cornered. She hadn't known how to tell me. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into my Maria's notes folder, and sat there for a long time in the dark attic while the cold seeped into my knees. The pressure didn't stop. My utilities were suddenly reorganized. One day the electric bill came in, my daughter-in-law's name. When I called the company, they told me someone from the Marino household had requested the change. No other details. Packages started arriving at my doorstep. Boxes with her name, my address, fancy things. Blenders, baby monitors, a pair of white leather heels that looked like they belonged on a runway, not a cracked Pittsburgh sidewalk. Amazon confirmed the orders. The shipping address had been changed through a shared account. My account. I felt my blood turn cold. She had access to everything. Bills, credit, the place where my life existed on paper. I went to the local precinct. The officer behind the desk was young but kind. He listened as I explained, nodding with that mixture of sympathy and helplessness cops sometimes wear when the law isn't built for heartbreak. "Family cases are tough," he said finally, "especially when it's not technically theft." "They forged my name," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You'll need proof it wasn't you." I dug in my coat pocket, pulled out a receipt, a bank withdrawal from the same day the paperwork was supposedly signed. "I was 3 counties over." He nodded slowly, flipping the paper in his hands. "Okay, that helps. But you'll need more." His tone wasn't dismissive, just honest. The kind of honesty that sits heavy in your gut. I walked out with a thin report number scribbled on a card. It felt like bringing a knife to a gunfight. That night, back in the truck, I stared through the windshield at the Walmart sign glowing blue against the cold sky. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. No more waiting, no more hoping they'd come to their senses. They wanted war, so I'd give them one. They came to my house again, this time unannounced and unashamed. No knock, no pause, no hint of respect. The door creaked open with a soft groan that made my chest tighten, and then she walked in like she owned the place. My daughter-in-law. Sunglasses still on, though it was overcast. Her hair sharp and sleek, as if even the rain knew better than to touch it. On her hip, my granddaughter, a sleepy tangle of curls and pink jacket. She didn't glance around like a guest. She scanned the house like a buyer at an open house. "Just taking measurements," she said brightly, already moving toward the hallway. "Figured the nursery would fit perfectly in Maria's sewing room." She said Maria's name so casually it stung, like it belonged to a piece of furniture she was about to replace. I didn't answer, couldn't. My tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. My palms went slick and shaky, so I shoved them deep into my pockets, praying she wouldn't notice. My son came in after her, slower, his footsteps reluctant on the wood floors. He didn't meet my eyes, just shuffled past, muttering to himself, brushing his hand along the hallway wall, like he didn't even recognize the house anymore. Like I was the intruder, and in that quiet, hollow moment, something cold settled into my chest. They weren't just taking advantage of me. They were replacing me. The following Sunday, they hosted a barbecue. In my backyard. I wasn't invited. I found out when the wind carried laughter through the kitchen window. A different kind of laughter. Sharp, young, careless. I looked out and froze. There they were. My son, her, neighbors I barely knew, friends of theirs I'd never met, solo cups raised, folding chairs scattered across the grass. Someone had brought a cheap Bluetooth speaker, blasting country pop, and my grill, was smoking. Maria gave it to me on our 30th anniversary. She used to call it "At the Throne," said a man deserved one thing that was truly his. I hadn't touched it since she died, couldn't bring myself to. Now it was slathered in sauce and arrogance. Grease hissed over flames as strangers flipped burgers with my tongs. I stepped out onto the porch. The screen door slapped shut behind me. Every head turned. She saw me first. Sunglasses pushed up onto her head now, eyes gleaming with something that wasn't quite kindness. "Don't worry," she called out, loud enough for the whole party to hear. "We left you a burger inside, no onions, just how you like." A ripple of laughter. Someone clapped. Heat rose to my face, but I didn't speak. Didn't trust my own voice not to crack. I turned and went back inside. But as I passed the fridge, something tugged at me. A small, gut-deep instinct. The loan document, the one I'd left, clipped to the fridge door, gone. I checked everywhere. Table, drawer, trash. My folders in the truck, gone. That's when the anger sharpened into something heavier. They weren't just pushing anymore. They were stealing, escalating, no longer waiting for my signature. Now they were preparing to forge again, or worse, to paint me as forgetful, confused, incapable. The kind of man who might lose track of his own paperwork. The kind of man a court would call incompetent. The next morning I made a call. Not to the police. Not to a lawyer. To Susan, Maria's cousin. The one person in the family who never looked at me like I was some relic from another time. Susan, with the brisk voice and sharp mind, who'd once told Maria over coffee that paperwork wins wars. She answered on the second ring. "Rich, you okay?" "No," my voice was flat. "Can you come by?" She didn't hesitate. 2 hours later, her old sedan crunched over the driveway gravel. She came in with a portable scanner under one arm, a yellow legal pad tucked under the other, and an air about her. Tough, no nonsense, the kind of strength you don't see much anymore. She looked around, taking in the house, the missing chair, the desk shoved where my recliner had been. "They're moving in already?" she muttered. I nodded, jaw tight. She set her things down on the kitchen table. "Show me everything." So I did. Every email, every forged page, every bank record, the file folders from the truck, Maria's letter from the attic, the warning about the secret account. Susan didn't flinch, didn't gasp or pity me. She just flipped pages with sharp, efficient hands, making notes in her pad. "They're banking on you staying quiet," she said finally. Her voice was calm but had steel under it. "So let's make noise the right way." She got to work immediately, helped me draft a revocation of power of attorney, filed a report with the county clerk to document suspected title fraud, opened a case with the state's Financial Protection Office, something I didn't even know existed. When we were done, she pushed the papers into a neat stack and looked me dead in the eye. "The more you stay silent, the more they win. You ready to hit back?" I swallowed, felt the weight of every sleepless night, every quiet humiliation, every whisper of Maria trying to warn me. I nodded. I wasn't just ready. I was boiling. I started gathering evidence like a man preparing for trial. Receipts, signature comparisons, bank statements showing account access at times I was 3 counties away. I drove to the notary who'd supposedly witnessed my signature on the first loan. The shop was small, one of those half-office, half-copy center places that smell of toner and stale coffee. A woman behind the counter looked up from her phone. "You were the witness on this?" I asked, sliding the forged paper across. She frowned, adjusted her glasses, and studied the document. "I don't remember you," she admitted finally. "Sorry, we notarize a lot of stuff." I pointed to the ledger behind her desk. She hesitated, but turned it around. The handwriting was sloppy, half illegible, but clear enough to show something off. The address listed for me was wrong. Not mine. Not even close. I thanked her and left, my heart pounding hard enough to feel in my throat. Every small inconsistency was another nail in their coffin. One afternoon, I was digging through an old shoebox Maria used for warranty slips and tax documents, when my hand brushed a folded piece of lined paper. No envelope, just tucked between water bills. I unfolded it carefully. Maria's handwriting again, shaky but determined. "Rich, don't trust the bank account ending in 2249. She opened it without telling you." I didn't recognize the number, but something about the way she underlined "don't trust twice" made my stomach drop. The next morning, I took the note to the credit union. The teller looked at it, typed something, and then looked up slowly. Careful, almost apologetic. "Yes, we have that account," she said. "It's under your name." "My name?" My throat felt dry. "Yes, sir. Opened about 3 months before your wife passed." I gripped the counter to steady myself. "There were 2 withdrawals," she added. "Both digital, both routed into a business account. Your son's. $14,000. Gone." The hypocrisy hit me like a steel beam. All those speeches about helping the family. All those guilt trips about me being selfish with the house. Meanwhile, they'd been quietly siphoning money out of accounts Maria and I built together, smiling at me while draining us, laughing in my backyard while stealing, playing house inside the bones of my marriage. And when they thought I was too broken, too old, too lonely to fight, they mocked me, called me pathetic, useless. They thought I'd just roll over. But the thing about steel, the longer you heat it, the harder it gets. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after dark, Maria's candle flickering against the window glass. Papers were spread everywhere. Deeds, statements, legal drafts from Susan. I stared at each one slowly, letting the rage settle into something solid. Not wild, not out of control. Cold, focused. It was time to forge a plan, not just a reaction. Not a yell across the yard or another pointless call. Something quiet. Something they wouldn't see coming. Something legal. The first certified envelope went out on a Tuesday. I remember the feel of it. The paper crisp and cool under my fingers, edges sharp enough to cut. I pressed the flap closed with the flat of my palm until it sealed tight, the glue tasting faintly of chemicals and finality when I caught it on my breath. White envelope, bold red stamp across the top, legal notice, signature required. Inside, a formal letter drafted by Susan and reviewed by her retired lawyer, friend, a man who'd spent 40 years in estate litigation and still enjoyed sticking it to crooks. It was written like a blade, every sentence measured, precise. The letter listed everything we had: forged documents, backdated filings, power of attorney paperwork illegally misused, banking irregularities, and stolen account access. And it stated in language no one could twist. The power of attorney was revoked, effective immediately, retroactively nullified. A second envelope went out the same day, addressed to the credit union where my accounts lived. A third to the county recorder's office, the quiet clerks who decide whose name stays on what property. Each one packed with proof of identity, each backed by notarized statements, each mailed with USPS tracking so airtight It would make an auditor smile. They wanted paperwork? I gave them a war of documents. No yelling, no banging on doors, just paper. Quiet, lethal. Then I waited. Day 1, silence. My inbox stayed empty. My phone stayed dark. Day 2, an email from my son. No subject line, just 2 words. Can we talk? No apology, no ownership, just fear. Day 3, a knock at the door. I opened it to find a courier standing there in a raincoat, shoulders hunched against the drizzle. He didn't meet my eyes, just handed over a large manila envelope with a clipboard for my signature. Inside, a counterclaim letter, legal threats dressed in polite font, defamation, elder confusion, a request for mediation, as if I were the confused one. I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in months. Because tucked inside that threat was a copy of the forged loan, the one they thought they'd destroyed, the one I had assumed disappeared when they stole it from my fridge. But here it was, and whoever copied it hadn't noticed the sloppiness. My name misspelled in 2 places, 1 letter off in the middle, like a bad forgery done in a rush. Their lawyer hadn't even caught it. That mistake was going to cost them everything. The next morning, I drove downtown. The courthouse smelled like waxed tile and paper dust, the kind of place where lives are quietly decided in manila folders. I walked the long marble hallway past bulletin boards filled with foreclosure notices and sheriff's sale dates until I found the clerk's window. I filed a cease and desist, backed by affidavits, the notary who couldn't confirm my signature, the address discrepancy from their sloppy ledger. Maria's handwritten warnings now notarized themselves as evidence. From there, I walked across the street to the county assessor's office, a squat building with gray blinds and fluorescent hum. The clerk, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, looked up as I slid my paperwork across the counter. I need to freeze a property title, I said. She scanned the documents, lips pressing into a thin line as she read. When she finally looked up, her voice carried quiet weight. You're not the first one. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice, though the room was empty. We've had others. Similar last names. Same address used. Same attorney's signatures floating around. I felt my jaw clench. Others? She nodded slowly. Your daughter-in-law? She's been involved in title flips before. 3 years ago, a house signed over from an elderly grandmother. Same agent. Same pattern. They'd gotten away with it once. They weren't going to again. By Friday, all 3 certified letters had landed. I know because I tracked every single one like a hawk, refreshing the USPS site at midnight, watching the little gray dots turn green. Delivered, received, signed, not by them, but by their nanny. Cowards didn't even accept the papers themselves. Saturday, the meltdown began. First, a text from my son. All caps, frantic, sloppy. What did you do? Then a voicemail from her, breathless and venomous. You just ruined our lives. Are you proud of yourself? No apology, no hint of regret, just fury and panic leaking through her perfect voice. I didn't respond, didn't give them the satisfaction of a single word. I waited, because I knew what came next. Monday afternoon, I drove out unannounced. Their new house, the prize they'd schemed and stolen for, was still half under construction. A pale, half-renovated thing with new siding, half-finished, and a big realty sign in the yard. Coming soon. Top school district. I parked, stepped out slowly, and walked straight to the contractor's trailer. Clipboard in hand, papers ready. The foreman, a stocky man in a hard hat, looked up from blueprints. Can I help you? He asked cautiously. Yes, I said evenly. You need to know the sale funding is under fraud investigation. Here's a notice of title freeze. Here's proof of delivery. His brows knitted as he scanned the paperwork. He looked from the pages to me, back to the pages. Then he nodded once, curt and professional, but his face betrayed surprise. He made a call right there. Low voice, short sentences. His eyes flicked to me once, then away. 2 hours later, trucks started pulling out. Ladders came down. Hammers stopped. the project halted. The next day, I drove to the little diner on the edge of town. Same booth Maria and I used to share every Thursday. 2 black coffees, rye toast, her laugh echoing over the clink of plates. The waitress Maggie still worked there. Time had deepened the lines on her face, but not dulled her warmth. She set a plate in front of me with a small smile. "You look lighter," she said gently. I stirred my coffee, watched the cream swirl into dark clouds. "I am," I said quietly. "I just got a house back." She didn't ask questions, just patted my shoulder as she passed, the way people do when words aren't enough. 2 weeks later came the final blow, another certified letter, but this time from them. An apology wrapped in legal language, every sentence dry and hollow. They agreed to relinquish all claims, to withdraw the fraudulent loan request, to cease contact with me permanently. It was desperation disguised as professionalism, a final attempt to avoid public humiliation, to stop the bleeding before the world saw the truth. But it was far too late. Susan had already filed the forged notary report. The state's elder fraud office had flagged the case. The bank froze questionable accounts. And their real estate agent, the same one who'd helped them flip an old woman's home 3 years ago, he dropped them the second he heard the words, fraud investigation. The facade cracked overnight. The golden couple with their curated smiles and perfect little family were suddenly just what they really were, thieves in nice shoes. Still, I wasn't done. There was one last thing, one last weight I needed to drop. I sat at the kitchen table, Maria's candle burning low, and pulled out the letter she'd left me, the one she wrote when she must have been scared and alone, unsure how to warn me. I read it one more time, fingers trembling, eyes stinging but dry. Then I slid it into a plain white envelope. No legal stamps, no red warnings, just a quiet goodbye. With it, I added a single sheet of paper. My words, simple and spare. "This is the last thing you'll ever receive from me. You made your choices. So did I. Consider this our final transaction." I didn't sign it, didn't need to. I folded it once, sealed it, pressed the glue down flat, and mailed it with no return address. No courtroom speech, no dramatic showdown, just silence, and the sound of a steel door finally closing. The snow started early that year, big soft flakes that seemed to fall in slow motion, drifting through the glow of the streetlights, like silent forgiveness. They gathered on rooftops and driveways, softened hard edges, turned cracked sidewalks into clean white paths. For the first time in a long time, the street looked calm again, the way it had before the phone calls, the stolen keys, the invasion of my life. I walked slow, hands buried deep in my coat pockets, gloves pressing warmth against old fingers. My boots crunched over fresh powder, each step sounding crisp in the quiet air. Houses on either side shone with warm light behind curtains. Christmas trees flickered faintly in some windows. Mine stayed dark, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like peace. I'd moved fully back into my house the week after the final letter landed in their mailbox. No more nights parked under Walmart lights. No more sleeping half upright in the cab of my old Ford Ranger with documents piled in the glove box. Just me, the heater that still groaned like an old man climbing stairs, and Maria's candle burning soft and steady on the kitchen table. Each morning I made coffee the way she always did, strong enough to stand a spoon in, no sugar, one solid mug before the day could ask anything of me. I didn't pretend it was the same. It wasn't. But it was mine again. I wasn't trying to go back to the past. I just wanted the ending to be mine. Not stolen, not signed away, not forged in some stranger's office. Word got around. In small streets like ours, news travels faster than mail. The neighbors stopped asking about the kids in hushed voices. Some avoided the topic entirely, eyes soft with quiet pity when we crossed paths at the mailbox. Others showed up with food in foil pans, casseroles, pies with lopsided crusts, bread still warm from the oven, small offerings of kindness, the kind that don't ask for explanation. A few days before Christmas, the woman across the street, Joyce, I think that's her name, knocked gently and held out a dusty box. "Old ornaments," she said, shy but smiling. "Figured you could use a few bright things around here." I took the box, heavier than I expected, and felt something stir behind my ribs. "Thank you, Joyce." She just patted my arm and walked back into the snow. I set those ornaments on the mantel beside the one photo I have left of Maria and me, taken in '87 at the top of Mount Washington, the U.S. Steel Tower stabbing up through the haze behind us. We were squinting into the sun, grinning like two kids who thought the world was theirs. It was for a while. As for my son, he never called again, not after the certified letters, not after the property freeze, not after the loan vanished into smoke. Somewhere out there, he and his wife were licking their wounds, telling half-truths to friends about a house that fell through, and a bank loan that got complicated. The fairy tale they'd built for neighbors and social media had crumbled, and I suspect they were working hard to hide the cracks. Let them. I wasn't bitter. I was done. There's a difference. One gray afternoon, I finally opened the last of Maria's boxes. I hadn't been able to before. Grief would crush me if I tried. But now the house was mine again, and somehow the silence felt safe. I sorted through old scarves that still smelled faintly of her perfume, her reading glasses with a tiny scratch across the lens, lists she'd never finish, groceries, birthdays, recipes she wanted to try. Tucked deep in a notebook was a photo I'd never seen. Maria standing in the yard, hair pulled back, the sun painting her face gold. Behind her, me, half under the truck, covered in grease, one hand raised mid-wave. She'd captioned it in blue ballpoint pen, the letters soft and careful. "The man who fixes everything, even me." I sat down on the edge of the bed with that picture in my hands. Not crying, not this time, just breathing. Remembering. It was the first time her memory didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a gift. Later that week, I drove out past the edge of town. The roads were nearly empty, lined with snow-dusted pines. The sky hung low and soft, the kind of gray that makes the whole world seem quiet and already forgiven. The Ford's dashboard glowed faint green, heater rattling in its familiar rhythm. The same truck that had been my war room now felt like a companion on a simple winter drive. I cracked the window just enough to let in the cold. The air bit at my cheek, sharp and alive. At a red light, I glanced at the passenger seat. Empty now, but not lonely. For the first time in a long time, the emptiness wasn't loss. It was freedom. I think about what happened sometimes. The betrayal, the stolen keys, the forged signatures, the quiet war of envelopes and affidavits. I think about Maria, too, about how she tried to warn me even when she was sick, how she scribbled notes because she was scared I'd be alone and vulnerable. I like to believe she knows I listened, eventually, that I fought back, not with rage, but with patience and truth. Steel doesn't shout when it's forged. It heats, it bends, it hardens. So did I. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.